Don't eat the dessert they served you. The waiter's words reached my ears like a cold whisper as my son Ryan got up from the table to take an urgent call from work. I was sitting in Chicago's most elegant restaurant, Le Bernardin, celebrating the sale of my construction company for $52 million. At 67, I could finally retire and fulfill the dream my late wife Margaret had always had, to create a foundation to help needy families build their own homes. My name is Jim Patterson, and I never imagined I would be wondering if my own son was trying to kill me. The dessert in front of me was a perfectly presented tiramisu, dusted with cocoa and decorated with fresh strawberries. It looked innocent, almost irresistible. But the waiter's words echoed in my mind like an alarm. Ryan, my 42-year-old son, had insisted that we come to this particular restaurant. He and his wife Amanda seemed especially excited tonight, more so than usual. Amanda was wearing an expensive red dress I had never seen before, and Ryan looked impeccable in a suit that cost more than many people earn in a month. "Sorry guys," Ryan said as he returned to the table, putting his cell phone in his pocket. "You know how it is, business never stops." He smiled, but there was something forced about that expression, something that didn't reach his eyes. Amanda adjusted her blonde hair and smiled at me. "Jim, you haven't even touched your dessert. The chef made it especially for you, it's the house specialty." I looked at her, then at Ryan, and finally at the plate in front of me. The waiter had discreetly disappeared, but his words still burned in my mind. Why would he warn me about the dessert? Why would he risk his job to alert a customer? Over the past 6 months, since I announced the sale of the company, Ryan and Amanda had become extraordinarily attentive. Frequent dinners, unexpected visits, constant questions about my plans for the money. Especially after I mentioned my intention to donate a significant portion to the Margaret Patterson Foundation. "Dad, is everything okay?" Ryan asked, leaning in slightly. "You seem distant." I smiled, keeping my expression neutral. "I'm just thinking about how proud Margaret would be to see where we've come." Amanda exchanged a quick glance with Ryan. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I caught it. There was something there, a silent communication that made me question everything I thought I knew about my own children. "By the way," Amanda said, her voice artificially sweet, "Ryan and I were talking about your plans for the foundation. $40 million is a lot of money, Jim. Are you sure you don't want to reconsider?" There it was. The real reason for this celebratory dinner. It wasn't about celebrating my success, but about trying to dissuade me from spending their money on charity. I picked up my spoon and held it over my dessert, watching their reactions. Ryan leaned forward slightly, Amanda held her breath almost imperceptibly. Their eyes were fixed on my movement, like predators watching their prey. At that moment, I realized that the waiter's words weren't paranoia. They were a warning that could have saved my life. I put the spoon back on the table. "You know what? I think I'm full. The food was excellent, but I'm already full." The disappointment that flashed across their faces for a split second was all I needed to see. My own son and daughter-in-law weren't celebrating with me. They were trying to get rid of me. As they exchanged nervous glances, I kept my paternal smile, but inside, something had changed forever. The man who had built an empire from scratch would not be easily eliminated by 2 greedy young people. And if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what comes next will show that they chose the wrong target. But at that moment, sitting in that fancy restaurant, pretending not to know that my own flesh and blood had tried to poison me, I began to plan something they would never expect. Because if there's one thing I've learned in 40 years of business, it's that revenge is a dish best served cold. Over the next 40 minutes in that restaurant, I watched my son and daughter-in-law with completely different eyes. Every gesture, every word, every glance exchanged between them took on a sinister new meaning. Ryan had always been ambitious, but in recent months there had been something different about him. Since Margaret died of cancer 3 years ago, he had become more calculating, more interested in the financial aspects of the family than in their emotional well-being. Amanda, for her part, was an even more dangerous force. She had married Ryan when he was at the height of a promising career as a real estate broker, but business had plummeted dramatically over the past 2 years. "Dad," Ryan said, leaning across the table, "Amanda and I were talking about the foundation. $40 million is an impressive sum." "Very impressive," Amanda added, her fingers nervously playing with the rim of her wine glass. "But have you considered other ways to honor Margaret's memory? Perhaps something that more directly benefits the family. There was their true colors. They couldn't even hide their greed for more than a few hours. Margaret always wanted to help people in need, I replied calmly. She volunteered at shelters since she was 20. The foundation is exactly what she would have wanted. I saw Amanda press her lips together slightly. Ryan cleared his throat and adjusted his tie, a nervous tic he'd had since childhood when he lied. Sure, Ryan muttered. But Dad, you have to think about the future. What if you get sick? What if you need special care? 40 million could guarantee you get the best treatment available. The irony was devastating. They were talking about keeping me alive when minutes earlier, they had tried to poison me. It was then that I realized this wasn't the first time. In the last few weeks, I had been sick on 3 different occasions after dinners with them. Stomach problems that doctors couldn't explain. Once I even had to be hospitalized for 2 nights. At the time, I thought it was stress from the sale of the company, old age, maybe some food allergy I had developed. Now it all made sense. You know, I began, choosing my words carefully, I've been having some health problems lately. Nothing serious, but my doctor recommended that I have some more detailed tests done. The reaction was instantaneous. Amanda choked slightly on her wine, and Ryan leaned forward with an expression of concern that seemed almost genuine. What kind of problems? Amanda asked, her voice laden with an anxiety she couldn't quite hide. Digestive problems, mainly. And some cardiac irregularities that showed up in recent routine tests. Ryan and Amanda exchanged a glance that lasted less than a second, but it was enough to confirm my suspicions. They weren't concerned about my health. They were worried that I might find out I was being poisoned. Dad, you should have told us sooner, Ryan said, reaching out to touch my hand. We could have gone with you to the appointments. I gently withdrew my hand. I didn't want to worry you. You already have so much on your minds. What things? Amanda asked quickly, too defensively. Work, business. I left the sentence hanging, watching their reactions. Ryan became visibly uncomfortable. His real estate business had plummeted after the local market collapsed, and Amanda had lost her job at the marketing agency 6 months ago. They were living off savings and loans, but maintaining a lifestyle they could no longer afford. The red Porsche in the restaurant parking lot, Amanda's dress that easily cost $3,000, the new Rolex watch on Ryan's wrist. All financed with money they didn't have, betting that they would soon inherit my fortune. Actually, Amanda said, forcing a smile, we were thinking of moving closer to you. So we can take better care of you now that you're getting older. Closer. To have more opportunities to poison me gradually without arousing suspicion. How thoughtful, I murmured. But don't worry about me. I have Jessica taking care of the legal aspects, the doctor monitoring my health, and the new foundation will give me a renewed purpose. I'll be quite busy in the coming years. The word years had the effect of a bomb. Ryan gulped, and Amanda nervously adjusted her hair. Years. Ryan repeated. Are you thinking of getting actively involved in running the foundation? Absolutely. Margaret and I have been planning this for decades. I want to be present in every detail, every project, every family we help. It may take a decade to set everything up the way we want it. I saw the desperation grow in their eyes. A decade was a long time to keep up appearances, to maintain an unsustainable lifestyle while waiting for an inheritance. That's when Ryan made his first serious mistake. Dad, he said, his voice taking on a slightly threatening tone, don't you think you're being a little impulsive? Maybe you should talk to a financial advisor before making such drastic decisions. Drastic. I repeated, feigning confusion. Donating money to charity is drastic? 40 million isn't a small amount, Amanda interjected. And you're not getting any younger. What if your mind, well, what if you're not thinking clearly? There it was. They were questioning my mental capacity, planting the seeds for an eventual contesting of the will, or worse, an attempt to declare me incapable of managing my own assets. My mind is perfectly clear, I replied firmly. Clear enough to see when someone is trying to manipulate me. The silence that followed was tense and revealing. Ryan leaned back in his chair, his mask of concerned son finally slipping. Amanda lowered her eyes, unable to hold my direct gaze. We don't want to manipulate you, Ryan said finally. We just want to make sure you're making the right decision. The right decision for whom? I asked, but didn't wait for an answer. At that moment, I understood the situation completely. My son and daughter-in-law weren't just greedy. They were patient predators, willing to kill me slowly to secure an inheritance they considered rightfully theirs. But they had made a fundamental mistake. They completely underestimated who I was. I hadn't built a real estate empire by being naive or blindly trusting people. I had learned to read between the lines, to identify lies, to detect hidden motives. And most importantly, I had learned that true strength comes not from reacting impulsively, but from planning carefully. While they thought they had me cornered, I was already mentally devising a plan that would ensure not only my safety, but also the justice Margaret would have wanted. The waiter approached discreetly to see if we needed anything else. When our eyes met, he gave an almost imperceptible nod, confirming that he had more information to share. "I think it's time for us to go," I announced, getting up from the table. "It's been a very enlightening evening." While Ryan paid the bill, I watched Amanda quickly stow something in her purse. A small glass vial that glinted briefly in the restaurant light before disappearing among her belongings. The evidence was there, within reach, but I knew I had to be smarter than that. Confronting them now would be foolish and dangerous. They could claim it was just medicine, or simply deny everything. No. I needed a more elaborate plan, something that would ensure not only that they were caught red-handed, but that they faced the full consequences of their actions. As we left the restaurant, Ryan put his hand on my shoulder in a gesture that, on the surface, seemed affectionate. "Dad, promise me you'll think about what we talked about today regarding the foundation." I smiled and nodded. "You can be sure I'll think long and hard about everything that happened today." They had no idea how literal I was being. Because that night, as I drove home alone, I began to devise something that would turn their sinister plans into the very trap that would destroy them. What they didn't know was that Jim Patterson hadn't survived 40 years in the business world by being easy prey. And when they found out, it would be too late for anything but regret. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity of mind I hadn't felt in months. Every detail of the previous night was etched in my memory with photographic precision. The vial Amanda hid in her purse, the look they exchanged when I mentioned the medical tests, the thinly veiled disappointment when I refused dessert. More importantly, the waiter's words echoed like a constant alarm. Anthony had risked his job to save me. That meant he had seen something specific, something that disturbed him so much that he couldn't keep quiet. I called Lou Bernardine at 9 in the morning. "Could I speak to Anthony, the waiter who served table 23 last night?" "I'm sorry, sir," the female voice on the other end replied hesitantly. "Anthony no longer works here. He resigned early this morning." My blood ran cold. They had found out that he had warned me. Did he leave any contact information? "I need to thank him for his excellent service." "I can't provide personal information about employees, sir." I hung up the phone with a growing sense of urgency. If Ryan and Amanda were able to force Anthony out of his job in a matter of hours, they were more dangerous and organized than I had imagined. That's when my phone rang. It was Ryan. "Dad, how are you feeling today?" His voice carried an exaggerated concern that now sounded completely fake. "Fine, thank you. Why do you ask?" "You seemed a little confused last night." Amanda and I were worried. Confused. They were planting seeds to question my mental capacity. "I'm perfectly fine, Ryan. In fact, I made an appointment with Dr. Harrison for this afternoon. I'm going to have those tests I mentioned done." The silence on the other end stretched on for several long seconds. "What tests exactly?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Complete blood work, mainly. I want to check for any foreign substances in my system that might be causing these digestive problems." Another deadly silence. "Dad, don't you think you're being a little paranoid? Digestive problems are normal at your age." "Paranoid?" I repeated, letting a hint of offense creep into my voice. "Is wanting to take care of my health paranoia?" "No, it's not that. It's just that, well, sometimes when we get older, we start imagining things that aren't there." There it was. The strategy was revealing itself. First they would try to kill me discreetly. If that failed, they would question my sanity to justify an attempt at interdiction. "Ryan, I'm worried about you. Your attitude has been very strange lately." "My attitude," he replied defensively. "Dad, I'm just trying to take care of you." Take care of me or my money. The words came out before I could stop myself. The silence that followed was charged with electric tension. How can you say such a thing? Ryan finally replied, his voice taking on a hurt tone. I'm your son, Dad. All I want is your well-being. Then you wouldn't mind if I donated all $52 million to the foundation? All of it. The word escaped as a muffled cry. Dad, you can't be serious. Why not? It's my money. Because you have to think about the family. About me, Amanda, the grandchildren we might have in the future. Grandchildren. They were planning to have children with my money, children who would grow up nourished by their own grandfather's blood. Ryan, I have to go. I have an important appointment. Dad, wait. Can we talk about this in person? How about lunch today? The idea of sharing another meal with them made me feel physically nauseous. I'm busy today. Maybe next week. I hung up before he could protest and immediately called Jessica Marquez, my attorney of 15 years. If anyone could help me navigate this situation without making legal mistakes, it was her. Jim. Jessica answered on the second ring, her voice carrying the genuine warmth of a long-standing friendship. How was the celebration dinner last night? Jessica, I need to see you urgently. Can it be today? The tone of my voice must have alerted her, because she immediately became serious. Sure. What time? As soon as possible. I'll be at the office in an hour. Jessica Marquez was a 58-year-old woman with gray hair that was always impeccably styled and piercing blue eyes that didn't miss a thing. She had represented me in the sale of the company and knew every aspect of my financial situation. More importantly, she had known Ryan since he was a child and had never liked him. I always thought there was something calculating about that boy, she had commented years ago, after Ryan had suggested that I invest in a dubious real estate deal, which fortunately, I had refused. When I arrived at her office in downtown Chicago, Jessica greeted me with coffee and a worried expression. What happened, Jim? I told her everything. Every detail of the dinner, the waiter's words, his sudden resignation, Ryan's strange phone call that morning. As I spoke, I saw Jessica's eyebrows gradually furrow. Did you save the dessert? She asked when I finished. No. I didn't even touch it. And the waiter disappeared. It seems he was forced to resign in the middle of the night. Jessica leaned back in her chair, her fingers drumming thoughtfully on the table. Jim, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Are you absolutely sure of what you heard? Is there no possibility that you misinterpreted it? Jessica, you've known me for 15 years. Have you ever seen me misinterpret anything important? She shook her head. Never. Your perception has always been too sharp for your own good. So you believe me? I do. And that terrifies me. She opened a drawer and took out a notepad. Let's document everything. Every suspicious incident from the last few months. Over the next 2 hours, we reconstructed a disturbing timeline. 3 episodes of food poisoning after dinners with Ryan and Amanda. A hospitalization that doctors couldn't explain. Sudden changes in their behavior after the announcement of the sale of the company. They're broke, Jessica said finally. I discreetly researched their financial situation last month when you mentioned the foundation's plans. Ryan owes $200,000 on credit cards. Amanda lost $50,000 in cryptocurrency investments. They've mortgaged the house twice. And I never knew. Because they didn't want you to know. They were betting on the inheritance to solve everything. But I'm still alive and healthy. Exactly. And now you've announced that you intend to donate almost everything. For them, that represents the end. Jessica stood up and walked to the window, watching the movement on the street. Jim, I'll be blunt. If your suspicions are correct, you're in real danger. They tried once and failed. They'll try again. What do you suggest? She turned, her blue eyes shining with determination. First, we're going to the hospital for complete toxicology tests. I want to know exactly what's in your system. Second, I'm going to hire a private investigator to locate the waiter. Third, you don't eat or drink anything in their presence until we resolve this. What if they insist on getting close? Leave it to me. I'll create some situations that will keep them busy and away from you. When I left Jessica's office, I felt for the first time in months that I wasn't facing this alone. But I also felt the real weight of the situation. My own son was trying to murder me for money. On the way home, I stopped at a drugstore and bought a home drug testing kit. If Ryan and Amanda showed up unexpectedly, I would be prepared. That night, sitting in the living room of my empty house, staring at Margaret's photograph on the mantelpiece, I made a decision that would change everything. "They've chosen to see me as an obstacle," I murmured to her photo. "Now they're going to find out why I built an empire from nothing." I picked up my phone and sent a message to Ryan. "I've changed my mind about the foundation. We can talk tomorrow about other options for the money." The reply came in less than a minute. "That's great news, Dad. Amanda and I would love to talk. How about dinner at our place? She'll make your favorite dish." I smiled coldly at the screen. They had taken the bait faster than I had imagined. "Perfect. See you tomorrow." As I put my phone away, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The discovery phase was over. The planning phase was beginning. And when it was over, Ryan and Amanda would discover that underestimating Jim Patterson was the biggest mistake of their pathetic, greedy lives. Because if there's one thing 40 years of building businesses has taught me, it's that the most effective revenge isn't the quickest. It's the most thorough. The next morning, I arrived at Dr. Harrison's office at 7 o'clock, an hour before normal opening hours. Jessica had called him the night before, explaining the urgency of the situation without going into compromising details. "Jim, I'll be blunt," Dr. Harrison said, inserting a needle into my arm to draw blood. "If your suspicions are correct, we need solid evidence before they try again." We collected blood, urine, and hair samples for complete toxicological analysis. 3 tubes of blood were separated, one for immediate analysis, one to be stored as evidence, and the third for cross-checking. "The results will be ready in 48 hours, he explained. "But Jim, if we find anything, we'll have to involve the authorities." "I understand. But I want to do this my way first." 2 hours later, I was in Jessica's office, where she had arranged a meeting with Marcus Thompson, a private investigator who worked exclusively on financial and family crime cases. Marcus was a man in his 50s with gray hair and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. A former Chicago police detective, retired due to injuries sustained in the line of duty, he now ran his own agency. "Mr. Patterson," he said, opening a notebook, "Jessica has told me the basics. I want to hear everything directly from you." For the next 90 minutes, I recounted every suspicious incident, every change in Ryan and Amanda's behavior, every detail of the night at the restaurant. Marcus took meticulous notes, occasionally asking specific questions that revealed his experience. "I located Anthony Valdez," he said finally. "The waiter. He lives in Cicero, working 3 different jobs now to make ends meet." "Did they threaten him?" "Indirectly. Ryan showed up at Lou Bernardine at 6 in the morning, talked to the manager. An hour later, Anthony was being informed that internal reorganizations required his immediate dismissal." Jessica leaned forward. "That's witness intimidation." "Technically, yes. But it would be difficult to prove without Anthony testifying, which he probably won't do out of fear." Marcus closed his notebook and looked directly at me. "Mr. Patterson, I'll be blunt. Your son and daughter-in-law are more organized than most criminals I've arrested. They covered their tracks, intimidated witnesses, and created a narrative about his alleged mental instability. If we go the traditional legal route, the chances of conviction are 50% at best. And what would be the non-traditional route?" Jessica and Marcus exchanged a meaningful glance. "They're planning to try again tonight," Marcus said. "At dinner at their house. They'll likely use a larger dose, something that looks like a natural heart attack." "How can you be so sure?" "Because we've been investigating their finances for the last 18 hours. The situation is worse than we imagined. They have debts with loan sharks who aren't known for their patience. Ryan had a visit yesterday at 5 in the afternoon. 2 men, expensive cars, 5-minute conversation at the front door. The blood ran cold in my veins. Are they being pressured?" "Pressured is an understatement. They have 2 weeks to pay $200,000, or the consequences will be permanent." Jessica picked up a folder and placed it on the table. "Jim, I've prepared a 3-phase strategy. Phase 1, you go to dinner tonight, but completely protected. Marcus will install recording equipment in their house this afternoon. You will wear a live transmission device. Phase 2, Marcus continued, you'll pretend to be sick, but it will only be an act. We'll have a private ambulance waiting 3 blocks away. And Phase 3? I asked. Jessica smiled coldly. The third phase is where they discover they completely underestimated who you are. She opened the folder, revealing documents that made me smile for the first time in days. While they were planning your murder, I was finalizing something I started weeks ago. The complete purchase of their debts. I looked at the papers, incredulous. You bought Ryan's debts? All of them. The credit cards, the bank loans, the mortgage on the house, and most importantly, the debt to the loan sharks. It cost $300,000, but now you are legally their primary creditor. Marcus chuckled softly. That means, technically, they owe $200,000 to the man they're trying to kill. The irony was perfect, but there was more. Jim, Jessica continued, I also prepared an emergency medical power of attorney and a temporary will that will automatically activate if anything happens to you. Ryan and Amanda will find out that even if they manage to kill you, they won't inherit a penny. Where does the money go? To the Margaret Patterson Foundation, which will be managed by an independent board for 10 years. After that, it will be re-evaluated for possible family distribution. I studied the documents, admiring the legal elegance of the trap. And they don't know anything about this? Nothing. To them, you're still just an old man with a lot of money and convenient health problems. Marcus stood up and checked the equipment in a black briefcase. Mr. Patterson, if you go through with this plan, there's no turning back. They'll find out eventually, and your family relationship will never be the same. I thought of Margaret, how devastated she would be to learn that the son we raised tried to murder me for money. But I also thought of how many other families might be going through similar situations, how many elderly people were being slowly poisoned by greedy relatives. Dr. Harrison called me 15 minutes ago, Jessica said softly. Preliminary results showed traces of warfarin in your blood. An anticoagulant that, in small repeated doses, can cause internal bleeding that looks natural. The scientific confirmation was like a punch in the stomach. My own son had been systematically poisoning me for months. They're going to pay, I said, my voice laden with a cold determination I hadn't felt in decades. Jim, Marcus said, placing his hand on my shoulder, when this is over, they won't just face legal consequences. They'll face the realization that they destroyed the only person who truly cared about them. If you're following this story of family betrayal, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because what happens next will show that Ryan and Amanda chose the wrong target for their greed. At 5 in the afternoon, I stood in front of the house I had helped Ryan buy 5 years ago, using part of the inheritance Margaret had left him. The irony of being invited to my own execution in the house my money paid for did not go unnoticed. Marcus had installed micro-cameras and audio devices in 3 rooms during the afternoon when they went out to shop for the special dinner. I wore a nearly invisible transmitter disguised as a hearing aid. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. When Ryan opened the door, his smile was the most fake I had ever seen in my life. But at that moment, armed with evidence, allies, and a meticulous plan, I knew it would be the last fake smile he would ever direct at me. The preparation phase was over. The execution phase was about to begin. And this time, I was completely in control of the game. When I entered the house, the smell of lasagna filled my lungs, but my stomach turned. The same recipe Margaret used to make when Ryan was a child, now being used as a cover for my execution. Daddy. Amanda appeared from the kitchen, wearing a floral apron that made her look like a devoted housewife. Glad you're here. Dinner is almost ready. Ryan approached with 2 glasses of red wine. I thought we could toast to the new possibilities for your money. I accepted the glass, but didn't drink. Instead, I watched their every move. Amanda kept checking her watch. Ryan seemed more nervous than usual, his eyes avoiding direct contact with me. You know, I began, sitting down in the armchair they offered me, I've spent the last few days thinking about our conversation at the restaurant. That's great. Amanda replied too quickly. We hope you've reconsidered that exorbitant amount for the foundation. Actually, I've reconsidered everything. 40 million really is a lot of money. I saw instant relief on their faces. So we've decided to reduce it to 10 million. The relief turned to confusion. 10 million. Ryan repeated. What about the rest? Well, I've discovered some interesting things about you two that have completely changed my perspective. The silence that followed was thick and threatening. Amanda and Ryan exchanged a look laden with barely concealed panic. What kind of things? Amanda asked, her voice taking on a defensive tone. I took my phone out of my pocket and placed it on the coffee table between us. Marcus, can you come in now? The front door opened and Marcus Thompson entered, followed by Jessica and Dr. Harrison. Ryan and Amanda stood up simultaneously, like cornered animals. What's going on here? Ryan demanded, his voice rising an octave. A little family reunion, I replied calmly. Dr. Harrison, can you share the test results? Dr. Harrison opened a folder and took out several documents. Your father has been systematically poisoned with warfarin over the past 3 months. The doses were carefully calculated to simulate natural heart problems. Amanda turned pale as a sheet. Ryan began to sweat visibly. This is ridiculous, Amanda stammered. Why would anyone do that? For $200,000 in debt to loan sharks, Marcus interjected, placing photographs on the table. And another $200,000 in credit cards and bank loans. The photographs showed Ryan entering loan shark establishments, Amanda withdrawing money from payroll loans, both living a completely unsustainable lifestyle. You completely underestimated me, I said, rising slowly. You thought I was just a silly old man with a lot of money and convenient health problems. Ryan tried one last gambit. Dad, this is a sham. They're manipulating you. Can't you see they're only interested in your money? I smiled coldly. Jessica, show them the debt transfer documents. Jessica opened her briefcase and spread papers across the table. Jim bought all their debts. The credit cards, the bank loans, the mortgage on this house, and most importantly, the $200,000 they owe to loan sharks. The realization hit Amanda like a shot. Her legs gave way and she slumped down on the sofa. That means, I continued, watching their devastated faces, that you now owe $400,000 to me. The man you tried to murder. Ryan began to tremble. Dad, please, we can explain. Explain what? How you put warfarin in my food for months. How you bribed the restaurant manager to fire Anthony. How you planned to kill me tonight with a lethal dose and make it look like a heart attack. Marcus held up a small glass vial. We found this in Amanda's purse when we broke in. Concentrated warfarin, enough to kill 3 men your age. Amanda began to cry, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration at being caught. You don't understand, she sobbed. We needed the money. Those men were going to hurt us if we didn't pay. So you came to hurt me first, I replied. Perfect logic. Ryan tried to approach me, but Marcus blocked him. Dad, we're family. We can work this out. Family. I felt a cold anger rise up my spine. Family doesn't poison their own blood for greed. Dr. Harrison spoke again. The doses they administered could have caused a brain hemorrhage or a massive heart attack. You're alive by chance, Jim. Actually, I corrected, I'm alive because Anthony risked his job to warn me. A stranger showed more concern for me than my own son. Jessica opened another folder. Jim also completely restructured his will. Even if they had succeeded in killing him, they wouldn't have inherited a penny. The final revelation completely destroyed any hope they still had. All the money goes to the Margaret Patterson Foundation, I continued. Managed by an independent board for 10 years. You would have killed your own father for an inheritance that never existed. Ryan slumped into a chair, burying his head in his hands. What do you want? Amanda asked, her voice reduced to a whisper. Justice, I replied simply. Marcus stepped forward. You have 2 options. First, we call the police now, present all the evidence, and you face charges of attempted murder. With the evidence we have, that's at least 20 years in prison. And the second option? Ryan asked, without lifting his head. You sign a full confession, Jessica explained. You admit everything, commit to leaving Chicago permanently, and Jim considers the debts settled. But there are conditions, I added. You never try to contact me again. You never use the Patterson surname again. And if I ever find out you're trying to harm other people, the confession goes straight to the FBI. Amanda looked at Ryan, both of them calculating their non-existent options. We have no choice, Ryan murmured. No, I agreed. You really don't. As they signed the documents with trembling hands, I watched my son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, took to baseball games, consoled when he lost his first job, become a stranger forever. One last thing, I said when they finished signing. Anthony Valdez now works as security coordinator for the Margaret Patterson Foundation. Salary of $100,000 a year, with full benefits. I stood up and headed for the door, followed by Jessica, Marcus, and Dr. Harrison. You have 48 hours to leave Chicago, Marcus informed them. After that, the confession will go to the authorities automatically. At the door, I turned around one last time. Ryan, your mother would be heartbroken if she knew what you tried to do. But she would also be proud to know that the foundation in her memory will save thousands of families. I left the house without looking back, hearing Amanda cry and Ryan punch the wall. Outside, I breathed in the cool Chicago night air, feeling truly free for the first time in months. But as I walked to my car, I knew that the real transformation was just beginning. Because discovering that your own son tried to kill you changes a man forever. And the person I would become from that moment on would be someone Ryan and Amanda could never have imagined or tried to manipulate. 6 months later, I stood before the Margaret Patterson Foundation's first project, a newly built home for the Rodriguez family, who had lost everything in a fire. Seeing Maria Rodriguez cry with joy as she received the keys reminded me why it was all worth it. Anthony Valdez, now the foundation's security coordinator, approached with a smile. Mr. Patterson, we have 3 more families approved for the next quarter. What about Ryan and Amanda? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. They honored the agreement. They left Chicago 5 months ago. The latest information is that they are living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Detroit, working part-time jobs. The irony was perfect. They had tried to kill me for $52 million, and now they were living exactly like the people our foundation helped every day. Dr. Harrison had called me the week before with good news. My tests were completely clear. The effects of the warfarin had been completely eliminated from my system. You gained years of life by discovering this when you did, he said. A few more months, and the damage could have been irreversible. Jessica organized a small celebration at the office. In addition to her, Anthony, and Dr. Harrison, I invited the Carters, the adoptive parents of Lily, the granddaughter I discovered during my research on Margaret's descendants. Lily had become a volunteer medical director for the foundation, applying her cardiac research at our community clinic. You know what impresses me most, Jim? Jessica said, raising a glass of cranberry juice. You turned their attempted murder into the salvation of dozens of families. It was true. The money Ryan and Amanda had tried to steal through my murder now fed, sheltered, and healed genuinely needy people. Margaret would be proud, I murmured, looking at the photographs on the wall showing all the families we had helped. The last news I had of Ryan came through Marcus. He had tried to get a loan using my name as a reference, unaware that all financial institutions in Chicago had been alerted to his attempts at fraud. The application was denied within 15 minutes, Marcus reported. When they asked if he knew Jim Patterson personally, he stammered and hung up. A few weeks ago, I received a letter with no return address. I recognized Ryan's handwriting immediately. Dad, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that we finally understand what we did. Amanda is in therapy, and I'm working at an organization that supports gambling addicts. We don't expect a response, but we needed to say we're sorry. I didn't reply. Some bridges, when burned by betrayal and attempted murder, cannot be rebuilt. But I kept the letter. Not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder that even the people we love can choose paths that force us to make difficult choices. That night, sitting on the porch of my house, looking out over Lake Michigan, I reflected on how a nearly fatal dinner had turned into the best thing that had happened to me in years. I lost a son, but I gained a granddaughter. I lost my illusion about family, but I gained clarity about purpose. I almost lost my life, but I found a renewed reason to live. The Margaret Patterson Foundation had already helped 53 families. Anthony saved not only my life, but also the lives of every person our foundation would help in the years to come. Ryan tried to poison me out of greed, but he ended up giving me the greatest gift, the absolute certainty that I was spending my money exactly as Margaret would have wanted. If this story of family betrayal and redemption touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We have hundreds of stories like this, showing that even in the darkest situations, we can find light and purpose. Sometimes the people who try to destroy us only show us who we really are. And in my case, I discovered that I am someone who turns poison into medicine, betrayal into purpose, and near death into new life. Margaret would have liked that twist.